Welcome to the history of Midnight Club. This will be a video documenting the entirety of the racing game series, Midnight Club. Developed by Rockstar San Diego and published by Rockstar Games, Midnight Club is undoubtedly one of the greatest arcade racing franchises to date. The series will span over 4 huge games, with the latest being Midnight Club Los Angeles, released in October 2008 for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and also on the PSP as Midnight Club Los Angeles Remix. In this video, we'll be going over the creation and the history of the beloved racing franchise. So, my name is Scvsdbfgd, and without any further ado, let's get into it. It all began with Colombian artist Diego Angel. Diego was highly talented and interested in 3D animation during a time where computer animation was very much in its infancy. While 3D computer animation hadn't existed since the 1960s, it was the 1980s where 3D animation really started to take off due to its advancements and more affordability in computer hardware at the time. The 80s was also when 3D animation saw more commercial use, like the first 3D animated music video, and the first movie to use CGI sequences. Diego Angel saw the potential in computer animation and eventually started up a software firm called Angel Studios, which had been located in Carlsbad, California. Angel Studios originally produced 3D work for various media, including fully fledged films and music videos, with their most notable work at the time having worked on the visual effects for the cult classic film The Lawnmower Man, and Peter Gabriel's hit song, Kiss That Frog. While Angel Studios were making a name for themselves in the 3D animation business, they wanted to try out something completely different. Something interactive that would involve heavy use of animation. Video games. In February of 1995, Angel Studios joined Nintendo's Dream Team. The Dream Team were a group of software and video game studios who would then release games for the up-and-coming Nintendo Ultra 64 game console, eventually was renamed to the Nintendo 64. To quote, "We've waited patiently to enter the video game industry until a vehicle was developed that allowed us to fully display our talents. The Nintendo Ultra 64 is that vehicle." In 1996, the first video game that Angel had ever created assets for would be released. This would be Zono's Sega Saturn game, Mr. Bones, which Angel Studios made the artwork and cutscenes for. As part of Nintendo's Dream Team, they had released 2 sports games and the critically acclaimed Resident Evil 2 port for the Nintendo 64 in 1998 and 1999 respectively. There also were 2 other games that remained unreleased, with one unreleased game being a vehicular combat game codenamed Buggy Boogie. This game would have seen vehicles eat each other and absorb their DNA to overtake their powers. However, after 6 months of development, Nintendo president Shigeru Miyamoto was unsatisfied with the game and he canned it, telling Angel Studios to work on a fantasy golf game for the system, which would also remain unreleased. This unreleased vehicular combat game did lay the blueprint for their next project, which would also have a very heavy basis on driving. Angel Studios was interested in doing business with Microsoft for a while and had tried to sell the company a 3D vehicle simulator project. However, Microsoft had something else in mind for the studio. The idea of an open-world racing game came when 2 Microsoft employees attempted to cross a heavily crowded street in Paris. The idea of an open-world PC racing game was proposed to Angel Studios by Microsoft. At first, they were hesitant to accept the offer, considering just how huge this project would be, but Angel took the offer anyway. This resulted in the creation of Midtown Madness, a fully fledged 3D open-world racing game that would take place in Chicago, with the state specifically chosen as it was the location featured in various car chase scenes from several films, the Blues Brothers being a particular inspiration. The game would go on to be released on April 30th, 1999, to favourable reception by critics. The game was praised for its open world, gameplay, its controls, and being very distinct from other racing games coming out at the time. After the release of Midtown Madness, New York-based video game publisher Rockstar Games started to show a huge interest in Angel Studios. around mid-1999, Rockstar Games eventually struck up a deal with Angel Studios for them to be working on 2 up-and-coming and planned launch titles for the PlayStation 2. One of these was Getaway, a driving game with the narrative of having to smuggle goods from one checkpoint to another under a strict time limit. This would later be released under the name Smuggler's Run. The other title was an illegal street racing game, Midnight Club Urban Racing, renamed to Midnight Club Street Racing, later on in development. The name was derived from the Japanese street racing team, Midnight Club. A reference to the Midnight Club racing team can also be seen in the Japanese kanji letters, which translates to Wangan, or Bayshore, which is a highway in Tokyo where the Midnight Club used to run on. Running on the cultural sway towards import tuna culture of the 2000s, popularized by the Fast and Furious in 2001, Angel Studios began creating a game that felt similar to Midtown Madness, with the open world driving feel. However, adding towards the allure of street racing would include cars with large body kits and wings to immerse the player in the game world. Three cities were planned for the game: New York, London, and Tokyo. New York most likely having been chosen because of Rockstar's headquarters being based within the Big Apple. Tokyo eventually ended up being removed from the game later on during development to assure that Midnight Club would make its release date on time. During the development of Midnight Club, in around 1999, a few Angel Studio developers visited several illegal street racing events to get ideas for the game. These activities were recorded and released as a DVD in 2002 called Mischief. The movie also featured the original footage used in the Midnight Club intro and also features clips of the yellow Mazda MX-6 being seen in the cover of the game.
Where we're at, we're hiding from the cops. We're at the street races and they blocked every exit. So we're hiding in a cage, a garbage cage. We got our cars hidden. I got mine covered with cardboard because it's yellow.
The vehicle in question is owned by car enthusiast Dustin Walls, who also has appeared in many of the Mischief clips. In order to shoot the cover image, they actually blocked off a small part of Times Square just for the shoot. The black Toyota Supra is owned by someone who, for the sake of the video, shall remain anonymous, but here's what it looks like now. The game would eventually be released on October 25th, 2000 for the PlayStation 2. In Midnight Club, you start off as a cab driver in New York wanting to make a name for himself. The player learns of a mysterious racing gang called the Midnight Club, and is very interested in joining. In order to gain a spot in the club, you'd have to race Emilio Sanchez, a Hispanic lowrider freak who loves to think that he's unbeatable.
You wanna race Emilio? Ha! You ain't got nothing I'm scared of!
In order to start new races, you need to find your rivals, dubbed Hookmen, cruising around the city and have to follow them to the race start. You could alternatively also call them on your cell phone to start a race. In addition to Emilio, the other New York Hookmen were Larry Mueller, a very serious guy who always wants to get straight to the point.
I'm Larry Muller. They don't mess with me in Queens.
And Kiko Hatano, a harsh, feisty, and sassy driver who likes to be quick and aggressive on the road.
I'm Keiko Hatano, the hottie behind the wheels. I like to drive very fast.
Eventually, after beating all the Hookman races in New York, you'd have to go against the New York champion, Kareem Windross, who has the hottest and fastest car in town, a PT Phoenix.
My name's Kareem, and I am so fresh that the girls can't settle for nothing less. I'm the champ!
With his extreme confidence only being exceeded by the speed of his ride.
Your luck just don't run out, does it?
Upon defeating Kareem, you unlock the second location of the game, London. You then challenge some of the London drivers, which are Lucas Howell Jones, a younger driver who you wouldn't want to trust with your sister and definitely not on the road either. He sees himself as the best street racer around and he'll do anything it takes to win.
Yo, word up! HJ on the mic.
Emily Morton, a girl who seems to have it all: the body, the money, the clothes, and most importantly, a fast car. She'll take anything if it hasn't been handed over to her already.
You'll never catch up with me, Emily Morton, fastest girl in town.
and the London champion, Darren Thurrock, a rude and methodical bloke who has one of the fastest cars in the world, the Armada.
Darren Thurrock, fastest man in London.
Fortunately for you, his skills really don't match his car that much, so it gives you a perfect opportunity to take your spot in the Midnight Club.
God almighty.
After all these races, you eventually get to challenge the world champion, Anika. She's a very secretive person, originally from Japan, who came to London to see if anyone could challenge her title as the world champion. She drives the Zenda Alpha, one of the fastest cars in the game. After defeating her, you earn the title of the world champion, while Anika flees back home to Japan.
Now you have everything. I am humbled. Leave me, please.
The game features 10 original race cars, with every car having 3 of its own versions, one stock and the other 2 customized versions of the same car, which technically stretches the car list to about 30 vehicles. These range from a taxi to sports cars and tuners, muscle cars, and pickup trucks. There's also some extra bonus vehicles like police cruisers and buses. The vehicles in the game are fictional, but have designs based off the real-world cars, such as the Fusudo GT being based off a mix between the MR2 and the Mitsubishi 3000 GT, or GTO to the Americans, or the Bueno's real-life counterpart being the Ford Fairline. Despite it featuring unlicensed vehicles, many cars do feature real-world aftermarket part logos on their designs, like Veilside, G-Ready, and Top Secret, amongst others. Most of the vehicles also have nitrous equipped to them, which gives them a nice advantage during races. The cars also sustain some damage and do deform while being damaged. A damage meter in the HUD indicates how far you are from totaling your car. Despite only featuring 2 locations, those being London and New York, they both have tons of recognisable landmarks. Those would include Central Park, Times Square, the London Eye, and far more. Here's a little fun fact for you. London was featured before in Midtown Madness 2, another racing game by Angel Studios that came out a month before Midnight Club. Remarkably, London and Midnight Club had actually been completely remodeled from scratch, with a slightly different layout, despite the fact that both games ran on the Angel game engine. Now, Midnight Club was very innovative when it came to racing, as the game had a very heavy basis on using shortcuts in order to find the fastest route to win, making very interesting use of the open world. AI drivers also used this extensively, and the strategy of this racing was emphasized even more in the newer Midnight Club titles, making for this distinct high-energy style of racing made the key trait to the franchise. Considering Midnight Club is about street racing, police reinforcement would obviously become a mechanic to feature within the game.
Hey buddy, you got some new friends, be careful.
The police are aggressive and will do anything in their power to slow you down and arrest you. Unfortunately, police cruisers don't spawn in free roam, and they're only really scripted to show up during certain events. The game has a pretty distinctive handling model from most racing games coming out at the time. By using the handbrake and joystick, you're able to make your car slide in whatever direction you wanted it to go. Using the handbrake to turn is pretty much a necessity most of the time, as otherwise you probably won't be able to master the tight corners. This way of maneuvering would become important to the following Midnight Club games as well. Midnight Club is split into 2 modes, the career mode and something else called arcade mode. Arcade mode is basically the equivalent to the quick race mode seen in a lot of other racing games, although it has several modes not seen during the career mode, and those features include a dedicated cruise mode, which is basically just free roam. You're able to select from what time of day it will be, the weather conditions, level of traffic, and the amount of pedestrians roaming around. A head-to-head mode, which is a simple 1v1 checkpoint race. Waypoint, which is basically a standard point-to-point race. And Capture the Flag, a mode where you'd have to grab the flag and deliver it to your base without the other team stealing it from you. The team who delivers the most flags before the time ends wins. The game also features a 2-player split-screen mode for each of these. The in-game soundtrack was composed exclusively for the game by artists signed under the Moving Shadow record label. The game featured 8 songs in total, 4 for each area, all composed by drum and bass act Dom and Roland. The game also had some other music composed by electronic musicians Derek May and Errol Bricker, such as Strings of Life and Read Only Memory. which were used in the game's intro and the race end screen respectively. Midnight Club had received favourable reception upon release, with many critics praising the fun and simple gameplay, the game's open-ended cities, exploration and controls. However, the game was panned for its bland visuals and plot. With it being one of the first racing titles out on the fastest selling console at the time, it was bound to sell pretty well, and it did. Midnight Club Street Racing managed to sell 1.9 million copies worldwide on the PlayStation 2 alone. A year later, in November 2001, a Game Boy Advance version of the Midnight Club Street Racing game was released. The port was not developed by Angel Studios, but was instead built by Rebellion Development, who are now known for being the people behind the popular and well-praised Sniper Elite titles. The GBA port stayed pretty faithful to the PlayStation 2 release, with it featuring the vehicles, both New York and London, and the story we saw in the PlayStation 2 version, only this time in 2D. The port received negative to mixed reviews, however, with it largely being criticised for having repetitive gameplay, incompetent AI, and overall just being a pretty lackluster version of the game. Midnight Club Street Racing became Angel Studios' most successful project, and it would only seem inevitable to branch the game out to a full series, and so, not too long after finishing the first Midnight Club, they started to work on a sequel.